Hello and welcome to another Tools of the Trade. Not a try and fly. We're not going to fly today. Ultra Weather XP has come out. The new version 2.5 has come out a couple of weeks ago. And it wasn't exactly without issues. So there had been some little things not working here and there, and it took some time to get it configured also so that everything, at least for me, is fine again. But eventually, and that's why I waited with the video, I started one shortly after updating Ultra Weather, but I had so many issues, not issues from the product itself, it was just the whole setup and everything, because it was also different and there were these new options, and it took time to understand what they're doing and what they also kind of where they interfere with things. So I ended up not publishing that video because it was just not giving a fair representation of the tool. And as usual, I'm not associated with any of these add-on makers, companies, and so on. So I'm also not associated with these. I pay my add-ons myself. I'm not getting anything paid by anyone. So when I express an opinion here, be it good or be it bad, it is my personal opinion. And in the case of Ultra Weather XP, I actually like that tool very much for a long time. And although we had some issues after the update, that's just normal things with software. Yeah, the guys are very responsive when it comes to fixing things. And so they did. It took a bit of time, and some people had some issues and difficulties here and there. But I think we have now reached 2.5.1 plus an additional hotfix, which at least here for me seems to have fixed most, if not all, of the issues. We shall see. And therefore it's time now to introduce that tool again, Ultra Weather XP, and it's in its new way. So what you see here, by the way, is Munich. It's clear weather. I use standard weather. I have not got any weather engines. But the thing with Ultra Weather XP is you can use external weather engines. Actually, Ultra Weather XP does not generate weather for you. It just depicts it. You see the visuals of weather, which is the clouds, the fog, the visibility, that kind of thing. That comes from Ultra Weather. But all the generation, what wind you have, where, and how many cloud coverage you have, and if it's raining or not, and all that comes from either preset weather here in X-Plane, which I'm going to use today, or from real weather downloads like X-Plane can do. At least for most regions of the world, you would get relatively okay weather. Or things like FS Global Real Weather or the new Active Sky for X-Plane. All of these and more can generate weather. They can ingest the weather into the simulator, and then Ultra Weather XP will try and make a decent, I don't want to call it completely realistic, because there are limitations in X-Plane when it comes to weather depiction, but a reasonable representation of the weather that you ingest into the simulator. One of the things that still is very difficult is cumulonimbus and thunderstorms in general. They are not very well depicted with no tool. At the moment, I don't know any tool that can represent them properly in X-Plane. Okay, but it's just a matter of time. I'm hoping that eventually we will see some, let's say, reasonable looking thunderclouds, like towering cumulonimbus and things like that. But at the moment, I'm happy enough with what I get here with Ultra Weather. So let's first look at the configuration for Ultra Weather. So if you go to settings here, it's similar to the old version. So if you haven't had Ultra Weather so far, it doesn't look completely different, but it looks actually different enough, because they have changed the way that ultra weather is configured. In the old one, you had a couple of sliders, you used them. There were 1 or 2 automatic settings, but most of them were manual sliders. You were tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until it was okay. Then you saved it, and usually when you found your best setting, after some tweaking and trying out, you would actually not touch it anymore, because it then would work. Here we have a slightly different approach. There is an automatic setting for almost everything, and what the guys did obviously is that they say, well, there had been so many issues with settings that might interfere with each other and so on and so forth. So we, the developers, will find the best way that these settings can be done automatically, and we apply it to the auto settings like auto mist, auto horizon, auto sun gain, what we see here. Okay, and you can turn this off and you can do your own thing if you don't like what the automatic is doing. But in my experience, what I've seen so far, it looks as if the automatic works in almost 100% of the cases, at least for me. As you can see, I have not turned automatic off, at least not for the sky settings, and also in the area of cloud settings, I have them all on in the meantime. Water settings, the same thing, and lights and shadows, where there is an automatic, I use it, right? Because I realized that this is actually giving me a decent representation, and I don't have to worry about, okay, I've changed this, and now everything looks totally quirky. You know, the automatic seems to work in all the cases that I have, right? Okay, so let's go through the settings. And the first thing is the sky textures. And sky textures are basically what we call sky colors in X-Plane. And there is a way of changing the sky colors. And what you can do is you can pick from one of the sets. And for example, if I switch to 1, it has now replaced the textures. So if I do now a reload all colors, you can see that this has changed here. All right, so let's remember that I was on 2. But in order to see a little bit more, we actually should probably go to either dusk or dawn, because you need to find for yourself what the best representation for dusk or dawn is. And for that, I'm using the time switch. Okay, so I have the sun here. And now what you can do is you can basically start iterating through the sky colors, do a reload, and check if things are okay or not. And maybe if we find a better one, so this is more pale, you know, I don't actually like it. This is quite nice. Let's see number 6. That's paler again, although it kind of looks not unrealistic. Yeah, 7 with okay. No, that is definitely no. That's too much. That is okay. Bit too intense for my taste. This actually looks quite nice. I might actually keep that one. 11 or 12. Okay, so. Yeah, that's the more reddish. So if you prefer the more reddish sky colors, that is probably that. I prefer it more into the yellow. Not too much into the yellow though. Okay, so what I can do now is I can simply go a little bit through and see if that. Yeah, it looks pretty okay. Now I'm going to go into the morning on the other side. All right, that means we need to turn now. towards the east, where the sun usually rises, also in the simulator. And then we start rising it and see if that looks, does that look okay? And that's the way you kind of find out, okay, how to do it. If you want to change the time quickly like that, there are two commands, time forward and backward. You can put this on buttons or keys and then use that to very quickly check if your sky colors are fine. Now there's a spectacular button. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what the big difference between the spectacular is. There seem to be some enhancements of some values, but I found out that they actually cause, the spectacular can cause some side effects that we had, and I'm not sure if the latest version has fixed these spectacular, and to be honest, I actually quite like the normal. But by all means, this is the thing with ultra weather, go and try it out, you know, turn it on and see what happens. All right, now next thing is mist. Auto mist basically means that it will decide, depending on the weather situation that you have, whether or not you have mist like low, mid or high. But what I can do is I can use the slider, and what you might have seen, let's take this out again. What you might have seen now is that there has been some see, here things are changing a little bit. If I put this on high, so that's for the automatic, I think. Yeah, I think you can put this on automatic and then use low, medium or high. It depends a little bit if you want to see more mist or not. Okay, if you have this on low, then it would probably keep the settings in the automatic mode. Lower than, so I had mid and I will keep mid. The outer horizon, now that is something where I actually had some issues at the beginning in the initial version, because I thought that the horizon just didn't look right to me. It looked something like, actually it doesn't look like that anymore because they seem to have changed something here. I quite like that, but I think we need to go into the day for that. There was some strange, how should I put it? Yeah, it looked strange when it came to the sky down to the earth thing. There was a weird dark area, and it just didn't look right to me. But you could fix this by going and changing this here. In the meantime, they have changed this a little bit because people had complained about it, and now this looks okay to me. Yeah, this is reasonable enough for me so that I can say, yep, that's fine. I don't need to change anything. The auto sun gain, again, that's now for the sun. So if you see what happens here, you can actually make a sun, what do you call it, an eclipse of the sun. Create a hole where the sun is, all right? Or you have it really high, or you use the automatic setting, which seems to adjust the setting depending on some parameters. You can activate random sky. That means it would actually take a different setting every time you start, probably. But I like my weather once I've set it. I don't need to have it. Sky scattering is also in the distance, that there is a scattering of the view. So they do that probably with something like mist and visibility settings. So you wouldn't be able to see way back into the horizon, but there is some scattering happening before that. And there's an extra gain which just makes things a bit brighter. So if you are, let's say, in the Mediterranean or in the desert, and you want to just give your view another boost, you could actually use this extra gain, which just makes things a bit brighter. By the way, that just reminds me, I need to turn off BlueFX because I would like to show you this. This is the original. And that's why I use something like a shader, because I personally think that the simulators, both of them, by the way, prepared the same, are just a little bit too pale to grayish, you know. There's not this vibrance that you have, especially on a summer's night or a summer's day, better to say. I don't like it, okay. But in order to give you a fair presentation, I actually need to. And here you can see what the gain can do for you. It can actually boost a little bit the brightness and take away some of the dreariness of the picture in general. Now that's just the way it is, that the picture is generated with certain colors, and what I do is with BlueFX I just shift a little bit the coloring so that it's slightly more into the red, although it's very slight, and I also use some brightness and some other settings just to enhance the look a little bit. You can do this with any kind of shader tool that exists. Sky colors depth. Yeah, you can see you can make it even more dreary. So I leave this up. The terrain distance, that actually says how far should the visibility set. That's my understanding of these settings. How far is the visibility with mist and fog, sort of, how far should you be able to see terrain? And if you keep this in the 50% range, is also, I think, a pretty well-performant setting. Then you wouldn't be able to see really far into the distance, especially when it comes to the reddish areas, because X-Plane from a certain point on does not render things anymore. It just puts this reddish texture there, and you can actually prevent that from seeing. For that, by the way, we should actually go, and I'm going to pause the simulator. I'm going to use the map, and I click here in case you have not seen this before. Okay, so this is how you can very quickly move up, and now you can see there is this kind of fog and mist. Although we have clear weather set in the distance, we get this scattering and so on. And see what happens when I put this down. Things become even less visible. Yeah, the changes here are very minute. It's not that there is a lot of things. Overall brightness, okay? So if you don't like the brightness, you can bring it up, but the thing is, you can overdo it. So there is this point where things are too much, and they get unrealistically pale or white, kind of. So again, you need to play with the with that setting. You should probably turn extra gain off. Then it's not so bad. 100% is actually looking okay. Or you leave it here and then you use the extra gain in order to just vamp up a little bit the overall brightness. I think I was on 51%. You should always remember your values. And then the moon glow, that's something for night. I haven't changed that. That is the original setting. So that's page number 1. Page number 2, and by the way, I had some issues in the original 2.5 because somehow there was some problem with these with the menus, and we had actually these buttons here overlaying. So they have corrected that. They have put a little bit of space between this and the buttons, so, and now it's fixed, so it doesn't exist anymore, that issue. It wasn't really a bad issue, but yeah, it caused a little bit of... we had difficulties reading this here. I couldn't read what was written here. So let's go through this. First of all, you can decide whether you want to use 2K or 4K cloud textures. To be honest, if you're running your simulator in full HD, so 1920 by 1000 something, and you're not running on a 4K environment, and quite frankly, you will not really see a big difference between the 4K textures and the 2K textures unless you are in a 4K environment. And that's what the 4Ks are for. If you run on a 4K environment with your screen and everything able and set to use 4K, having 2K textures might actually look not as crisp as it could. Yeah, so in that case, you can switch by pressing on this button. You can switch to the 4K textures. I'm not running in a 4K environment. I'm running 2K actually, basically. And it could well be that my clouds could look that tiny wee bit better with 4K, but it has an impact on your performance because it will use more VRAM in your graphic card and all that. 4K textures do have a certain price when it comes to frames and performance. That's as simple as that. And because I haven't really seen a huge difference, I actually haven't seen any difference. It didn't look much different when I changed it. Decided to go for 2K. Now it's up to you, and if you have good systems and if you can actually see, due to your equipment and all, you can actually see a difference, by all means, turn it on 4K. I'm happy as it is with 2K. And because we're now in clouds, I think it makes sense that I go and produce some clouds, because we are on a CAV OK sky here, and that is not really what we need. So I go, no, let's use this here. So I start first with Cirrus Clouds, just to show you that. So these are the Cirrus Clouds. And for that, I think I'm going to go out. And unfortunately, there's the one issue that has not been fixed, although I had hoped for, that has not been fixed in all the patches. I have the latest patch, just downloaded it from the Google Drive and all that. Yeah, this appears to still be, I call it the you know, this magic trick where you put a lady into a box and then you take the saw and you cut it in half, her in half. Yeah, that's a bit like that. So I call it my magic trick. There is some issue when you are above 2,500 or 3,500 feet or so above the ground. It starts changing some of the view parameters so that your perfectly normal views that would normally work get this kind of cut here. You can see now the wing is cut. If I turn ultra weather off now, this would actually disappear. All right. So that has not yet disappeared, and not that it. I'm not really worried about this, or it's not a reason to get angry or to try and fix it by all means. It's just a bit of a pity, because it makes video making actually is becoming more difficult due to that, because I can principally not use my views, the ones that I have. What I need to do is I need to actually go quite away from it and then zoom in, which is not the same as if I would actually be hanging on the wing. As you can see, I get difficulties producing the same views by zooming, and it looks odd. So as a video maker, what I would actually do is I would turn, if I need shots like this, I would actually turn ultra weather off and use standard clouds. That's the only thing that's left over, but I'm pretty sure sooner or later this is going to get fixed as well. So there's absolutely no reason to be worried about it, because that is a small thing. And who knows, maybe it's a combination of settings. We've tried already a couple of things, and maybe a combination of settings fixes that. It could well be. Eventually, yeah, like that one. So this is the Cirrus Clouds. And again, you can start going through your clouds. And for that, you need to bring up the texture browser. All right. And in the texture browser, you need to enter cloud. And here comes the thing. Here are these cloud textures, okay? And you have about 6 of them. And when you make a change to your cloud textures, also when you switch 2K and 4K, you must reload those clouds. And I'm going to show you in a moment how that works. Let's first very quickly look at the settings. Let's put this down here. So the settings at the moment are color clouds, white, blue, and gray. Actually, I would like to go for white again. It gives a tint in the cloud. So if you go for white, they are very bright, and that's actually the kind of clouds that I like. If you go for blue, they get a bluish tint, all right, and if you go for gray, they are more dark. There's a sort of a gray part to it. They are a little bit darker, and they actually work well if you have really bad weather. And sometimes it can look a bit odd if the clouds are too white in a bad weather situation. So you could actually switch from white to gray. Blue doesn't work for me. It looks odd. In my eyes, it looks odd, but again, there's a lot of personal taste. You know, you need to really try these out and find out what works best for you. Now, because I installed it recently, we have again cloud set number 1. And in order to really see what the cloud sets are, we need to actually change the weather again and really get some clouds going. I'm going to call up Broken. All right. And yeah, well, we look at it like this now. So this is Broken Clouds around me, 2K, set number 1, with basically all automatic settings. I do not use these are all automatic settings. Okay, there's some extra blending, variety, CLD, reduce flickering. So in some cases in the clouds there can be some flickering, and you can turn some measures on which might reduce the flickering. I do not have that flickering, at least very rarely, and so because these change actually the thickness, they do actually change some parameters, and in my view, unless the flickering is really bad, if you turn this on, the clouds don't look as good, at least not for me. Don't forget, this is all very personal preference and taste that people have. So let's see. So this is what it looks in cloud set number 1. Now, if you want to see how this cloud set number 2 looks, what you need to do is you need to double click here, say reload, double click here, say reload, double click here, say reload. I think you get the idea of how this works. Aha. So we found actually the cloud texture that make these here. That's cloud path 3. Cloud path 4, there's a bit of 4 in there as well, and cloud path 5, has been a bit of path 5 in there. So this is what cloud set number 2 looks. They are a little bit less fuzzy, less woolly, or I don't know, and you see a bit more texture. Okay, still I'm not sure that I like it, but let's try the next one, cloud set number 3, and you have to go through the same routine. Start changing each and every path. So we should see some changes now. There you see, reload, reload. To be honest, number 1 was so far the one that I personally liked the most, but we have another to go. Now we're not going through all of them, but just wanted to show you that things do change. So this, for example, tends to be a bit more like what I like. I like the kind of hazy, not too gritty textured clouds, because from the plane, clouds usually don't look too textured or too. Very often they just look like this here, okay? Because you're not watching the cloud, and you do not focus on a particular feature of a cloud. When you look out there, you see this ocean of clouds, basically. Okay, let's go up a little bit more and have a look at it from the top. And for that, we need to, so. And this is the thing now with the textures as well. So does that look right? It does not look bad, definitely. Now let's go back to number 1 and just check out what it looks like. Reload. 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 I have a feeling that number 1 looks actually different. There may have been another set of clouds being loaded. So, how does that look? Well, reasonably okay, but not exactly the way I would like it. Overcast mode. Here you can switch between puffy, normal, and flat. Flat looks not good. That looks somewhat okay. I think I need to find my clouds again, and if I remember correctly, they were, I think, on the 11. Anyway, I don't want to go through all the textures now. That's the thing, by the way, after an update, you usually get changes in your settings, and things start looking different because your settings have changed, and also the automatic modes. I think that's more like it. I think that was the one that I had when we started. Yeah. Right. So that's that. You can do auto cloud brightness. Okay. I leave that on auto. You can change the size and amount. I leave this on automatic. Yeah, size. You see what happens? So I think this is too small, and I prefer to have it more like this because that also gives you a better coverage, let's say. So let's put this on automatic. They go a little bit back. Okay, then auto avoid cutoff. Yeah, that's all these mechanisms now of cutting off and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure actually what this does. Right, then extra blending. And by the way, in case you wonder where the aircraft has gone, this is now a very good example that the aircraft is gone, because due to this clipping effect, I actually don't see the aircraft anymore. These are the outside views, and because we are high up, we have actually disappeared. The airplane has disappeared. See? So here it comes. So at 46,000 it's back. And if we go further down, further down, further down, further down, from a certain altitude on, there we go. On the ground, it's complete again. So unfortunately, that has not changed. This is still, for me, this is still an issue. And it disappears when you're too high. Now, we will never be able to fly in these altitudes, so it's not a problem. But yeah, we still have that. So let's go up again and look at the clouds from the top. By the way, the performance, you can see there has been no drop whatsoever. We are still on my limited 40 frames per second. So all fine when it comes to that. Auto sun calibration, clouds. Now here you can change the kind of cloud, the impact of the sunlight on the cloud. So you could actually make it a bit more glistening and blinding, sort of. And to be honest, I actually would prefer this. So this could be a reason why I would change the automatic here in some cases and just make this a little bit more reflective of the sunlight. And again, you can change here, okay, or you just leave it on auto cloud shadow power. Yeah, I put this on high so that we really see cloud shadows as they are. Amount of in-cloud puffs, the more you have, the more something is. I'm not sure if that would impact your performance. Doesn't look like it. But you can play with it. I actually quite like this setting that we have right now. Out of cloud puffs, what does that do? It doesn't look really that different, to be honest. Yeah, a little bit, maybe. Yeah, it gets, oh, it actually gets a bit, the clouds get a bit more fluffy when you set this up. Let's keep this for the moment. This looks actually quite nice. So we actually have a first automatic thing that I turned off. Interesting. What is when I turn off extra blending? You can see there's a bit more pronounced borders here around the clouds. Nice. So that's about it, what you can do with the clouds. And as you can see, I think this looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. Now let's see what happens when we go to Overcast. And let's not forget, ultra weather just depicts the clouds. And now this is a bit of a disturbing thing. It almost looks as if we have a hole under the aircraft. So we can nicely see that's not overcast. For me, this is not overcast, I would think. So auto cloud brightness, auto size and amount. Yeah. So there is a hole. The interesting question is if this hole is there by accident or if that is actually, oh, maybe we should quickly turn it on, yeah. Because it seems that we are flying in a hole. Let's go down. Let's go down to gear overspeed. Okay, so we've damaged our gear. Now, if you see this over the airport, let's stop that. Over the airport, we now have, see if you can still see this. See, the hole is gone. So there is a bit of a compromise, it seems. It's probably a compromise that the developers did. So when you're under the cloud layer, they use this kind of grayish fog or whatever that is in order to simulate a complete coverage of the clouds. But in reality, we actually do have a hole here, and we've seen through the hole from above. So there are still some things that are not working, let's say, 100% realistically. It looks okay from down here. It doesn't look really okay from up there. So if I go back to the flight level, you can see we can directly see the airport. All right. Now let's change the pitch. Okay, so yeah, we can see this hole that doesn't exist, and the coverage is all over the place. Yeah. Let's try low visibility. Okay. That is low visibility. What altitude am I on? 10,000. So let's try and climb above the clouds. I'm going to go to 33,000. Okay. Now, let's quickly check that is, yeah. Now this looks much, much better. So it seems that it has now created a cover that looks okay from above and below, apparently. So this is now the ocean of clouds that I would expect due to the visibility. Interesting. So some of it, by the way, is really caused by whatever ingests the weather, very clearly. It could be that this hole is actually being ingested like this. It doesn't mean that Ultra Weather has done something wrong. It just means somehow there's a hole there, and so there is no clouds that's being drawn in this area. And from below, they use the visibility option in order to cover up the holes and make it an overcast sky, which is good. And you've also seen that we actually grew a little bit darker. So if I go out of here again and I go down again, you can see that once we go through the clouds, see, things are dark, but not as dark as they used to be in previous versions of Ultra Weather XP, because there we had the lights on, it was midday, it was bright above the clouds, and when we were below the clouds, it was darkness, it was like night. And that was unrealistic because that's not the way it looks when you fly through a cloud cover like this, okay? This is much better, and I actually quite like it now. So the way it is, let's move this away. Okay, so I think we've seen basically all the important things for the clouds. Let's quickly go to the water settings. What can I tell you? This is very simple. You pick one of your colors. I like green. Yeah. In case you want to change this, what you need to do is you go to the texture browser and you look for water. And interesting thing is you need to use any .png, right? You make a reload, and then it reloads the well, we actually haven't changed things, so let's go to green. Reload, now it's green, and presto, you have green water hands-on. All right. The colors aren't really great, and I think I've just overwrote myself a self-made texture, but doesn't matter. I can recover it again because I don't like these colors, but that's X-Plane. That's not ultra weather. That's X-Plane in general. With water, they still, compared to prepared, they're not doing a very great rendition of water in general. Yeah, it's the coloring is odd, and the waves is always a challenge. But here, if you use the auto water waves, I think Ultra Weather does now a pretty decent rendition of waves, so that you don't get the chessboard, checkerboard kind of view of large bodies of water, because that looks really odd, and I don't like it at all when you see the patterns. Okay, so I think they do a pretty good automatic rendition of water, depending again on the weather. That means the more winter is and the higher the waves would get, they would actually adjust it accordingly, and I think that's quite okay. I have water reflections turned off because water reflections just take away frames, and they don't look well anyway. It just doesn't work in X-Plane. So I leave them off and save myself the cycles for other things, for good scenery and all that, instead of some reflective water. And again, you can use the random for your water. And then the last thing that we have is the Ultra Weather XP lights. It actually makes changes to your light settings, and for that we need to go back into the dark. So I'm changing the time again. So we're in the middle of the night, and now is an interesting thing. First of all, it does auto night haze, and you know what that is? This is reflections of the, or it's supposed to be the reflections of the lights into the misty air, because when you have mist like that, the light actually gets dissipated and reflected inside the, and they simulate this. So that's why we have this strange shiny haze here, and that is actually, it's not, it may not be 100% like it's in real nature, but I think it's a very good approximation of that effect. And I was wondering first when I saw this, and I thought, oh my God, what's that? Why is it getting bright again? And then I realized this is actually a simulation. If you don't want that, you can turn this off. See here, right? That's what this is. And the other thing they've done is, there is now a switch, and that was one of the problems that we had with overcast sky during the day, because it used to get darker than a certain point, and when it's darker than a certain point, X-Plane turns on the lights. So what they have now is this switch where you can decide whether you want the airport lights to go on in overcast condition. I have this turned off because it just doesn't look right to me. Unless it is really so dark that we can talk about almost night, then you obviously need the lights. But normally at 12 o'clock on an overcast day, you do not need the full lighting of the airport. And it looked odd. It just didn't look right. So here you have now the option to turn it on or off, which I find great. There's a bit of sound stuff, ambient volume here, kind of wind and other sort of distant noises that you have on the outside of an airport. You can turn this on, you can turn this off, and you can generally turn on or off shadows. And I have shadows on, and the shadows we're talking about are not the cloud shadows, because you do them differently. So let's go back into the brightness. All right, now there's a little explain thing. I don't think that the sun would reflect like this when there is an overcast condition. But yeah, well. Let's quickly change back to clear weather, and let's go into the cockpit. By the way, in the cockpit, everything works fine. So what you see is the shadows here, okay? So you can change the shadow resolution. The lower you do it, the more frames you will have, obviously. But the more crappy the shadows will look. It's as simple as that. It's a trade-off. You need to figure it out. If your graphic card can deal with, so I have it about like this here, 6,000 or somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. Actually, I would put this to 6,000 for me, so that I don't see too many of those crookedy lines here. The shadow distance is how far shadows on objects and so on should be drawn, okay, and the shadow power. In this case, you can see how strong should the shadow be, and I just don't like half-hearted, half-assed shadows, so for me they're 100%. The shadow distance, here you really can determine performance from, so the more distance you have for shadows, because shadows, depending by the way on your settings, right? So you need to look at your graphics settings. Oh no, hang on, that was, yeah, implicitly, I don't think you can see this. So the further the shadows are supposed to be drawn, the less frames you may or may not get. Okay, so this could be something that will impact your performance. If you have performance issues, that's one of them you can tune down. I have it something like 30–40%. If you turn them off, they're completely gone. So that means you do not have shadows then. Okay. But I think shadows belong to the reality impression that we have in the simulator. So that's it. That's all I can show you from UltraWeather XP. Rain and thunderstorms and stuff, yeah, they do a decent representation, but it's not, it will not be perfect at all. That's just the way it is. Let's go to Stormy. Yeah, you can see low-hanging dark clouds here. And somewhere in here, we're probably going to see some lightning coming. And when we go above the clouds, then you can see that, well, you know, this isn't really cutting it. Yeah. So there are some areas where things are not really working out that well. If you're too high, by the way, we are far too high. I went far too high. So what we see here is not realistic. So let's, oh yeah, here we crashed our gear again. I think I need to start a new flight. So that's the problem with doing it like this. And now we have actually some flimmering here, and yeah, you need to check that out. So in some cases we actually see flimmering, but you know where that comes from? I show you, because if we go outside, we have some smoke coming from the front, and that is actually the aircraft. This is not UltraWeather. Here the Cirrus Vision Jet. Yeah, has the contrail actually in front at the nose. Oops, I think we should stop this here now. So that flickering didn't come from the clouds, that actually came from here. And yeah, I think with these pictures. I think we will end our ultra weather simulation. You can see the rain now. We have some rain effects here on the Cirrus. There is a library that you can add. This is actually a modded Cirrus, by the way. I've done a video about that. And yeah, that's it. That's Ultra Weather XP. Great stuff. I really like it. And I think apart from, let's say, a few small weaknesses in certain areas, I think it's one of the best tools and it's the best performing. By all means, SkyMax and XEnviro do not perform the same way, and it doesn't look, so if you make it perform, usually it doesn't look like that. It looks not so good. I've seen enough videos now. I have XEnviro, and I also don't like the mess that XEnviro leaves, and all the restrictions and the other problems that you have. So for me, this here together with something like FS Global Real Weather is the combination that works best for me. Doesn't have to do for other people, but for me this is actually the best combination and the best performing, by the way. Because we have rain now, as you can see, the frames went down a little bit, but that's just normal. That is X-Plane, okay? Lots of clouds and lots of rain. Don't forget all these raindrops that are simulated. They take away from the graphic card is now at 95%. Before it was at 56. So obviously things will go down a little bit when you do weather like this. Well, that's it. Enough of this catastrophe picture here. I hope that was helpful to you. Until next time.